in revenue. And if you divide that by your hourly rate, you begin to get some sense of what you are worth an hour. And when you have to make trade-offs of, should I do something like write software, or should I just buy it, or should I outsource this, having in your head what you cost your organization an hour is really kind of a staggering thing to change your behavior, because you start realizing that, wow, if I free up 3 hours of my time, and I'm thinking of that in terms of dollars, that's a big savings. So start thinking about your time and your money almost as if they are the same thing. And of course, Ben Franklin knew that a long time ago. So you got to manage it. And you got to manage it just like you manage your money. Now, I realize not all Americans manage their money. That's what makes the credit card industry possible. And apparently mortgages, too. So, but most people do at least understand. They don't look at you funny if you say, well, can I see your monetary budget for your household? In fact, if I say your household budget, you presume that I'm talking about money, when in fact the household budget I really want to talk about is probably your household time budget. At the Entertainment Technology Center at Carnegie Mellon, students would come in, and during the orientation I would say, this is a master's program, everybody's paying full tuition, and it was roughly $30,000 a year. And the first thing I would say is, if you're going to come into my office and say, I don't think this is worth $60,000 a year, I will throw you out of the office. I'm not even going to have that discussion. And of course, they would say, oh God, this Pausch guy's a real jerk. And they were right. But what I then followed on with was, because the money is not important. You can go and earn more money later. And what you'll never do is get the 2 years of your life back. So if you want to come into my office and talk about the money, I'll throw you out. But if you want to come into my office and say, I'm not sure this is a good place for me to spend 2 years, I will talk to you all day and all night, because that means we're talking about the right thing, which is your time, because you can't ever get it back. A lot of the advice I'm going to give you, particularly for undergraduates, how many people in this room are undergraduates, by show of hands? Okay, good. Still young. A lot of this, what did Hans and Franz on Saturday Night Live, if you're old enough? Hear me now, but believe me later. Right? A lot of this is going to make sense later, and one of the nice things is Gabe has volunteered to put this up on the web. I understand that people can actually watch videos on the web now. So this is... So a lot of this will only make sense later, and when I talk about your boss, if you're a student, think about that as your academic advisor. If you're a PhD student, think of that as your PhD advisor. And if you're watching this and you're a young child, think of this as your parent, because that's sort of the person who is in some sense your boss. And the talk goes very fast, and as I said, I'm very big on specific techniques. I'm not really big on platitudes. I mean, platitudes are nice, but they don't really help me get something done tomorrow. The other thing is that one good thief is worth 10 good scholars. And in fact, you can replace the word scholars in that sentence with almost anything. All right? So almost everything in this talk is to some degree inspired, which is a fancy way of saying lifted, from these two books. And I found those books very useful, but it's much better to get them in a distilled form. So what I've basically done is collected the nuggets for your behalf. I'd like to talk about the time famine. I think it's a nice phrase. Does anybody here feel like they have too much time? Okay, nobody. Excellent. And I like the word famine because it's a little bit like thinking about Africa. I mean, you can airlift all the food you want in to solve the crisis this week, but the problem is systemic, and you really need systemic solutions. So a time management solution that says, oh, I'm going to fix things for you in the next 24 hours is laughable, just like saying I'm going to cure hunger in Africa in the next year. You need to think long-term, and you need to change fundamental underlying processes because the problem is systemic. We just have too many things to do and not enough time to do them. The other thing to remember is that it's not just about time management. That sounds like a kind of a lukewarm, a talk on time management. That's kind of, milquetoast. But how about if the talk is, how about not having ulcers? All right? That catches my attention. So a lot of this is life advice. This is how to change the way you're doing a lot of the things and how you allocate your time so that you will lead a happier, more wonderful life. And I loved in the introduction that you talked about fun. Because if I've brought fun to academia, well, it's about damn time. If you're not going to have fun, why do it? Right? That's what I want to know. I mean, life really is too short. If you're not going to enjoy it, people who say, well, I've got a job, but I don't really like it. And I'm like, well, you could change. Well, that would be a lot of work. You're right. You should keep going to work every day doing a job you don't like. Thank you. Good night. Right? So the overall goal is fun. My middle child, Logan, is my favorite example. I don't think he knows how to not have fun. Now, granted, a lot of the things he does are not fun for his mother and me, but he's loving every second of it. And he doesn't know how to do anything that isn't ballistic and full of life, and he's going to keep that quality, I think. He's my little Tigger. And I always remember Logan when I think about the goal is to make sure that you lead your life. I want to maximize use of time, but really that's the means, not the end. The end is maximizing fun. People who do intense studies and log people and videotape them and so on and so forth say that the typical office worker wastes almost 2 hours a day. Right? Their desk is messy, they can't find things, miss appointments, unprepared for meetings, they can't concentrate. Does anybody in here, by show of hands, ever have any sense that one of these things is part of their life? Okay, I think we've got everybody. So this is a universal thing, and you shouldn't feel guilty if some of these things are plaguing you, because they plague all of us. They plagued me for sure. And the other thing I want to tell you is that it sounds a little cliched and trite, but being successful does not make you manage your time well. Managing your time well makes you successful. If I have been successful in my career, I assure you it's not because I'm smarter than all the other faculty. I mean, I'm looking around and looking at some of my former colleagues. I mean, I see Jim Cahoon up there. I am not smarter than Jim Cahoon, okay? I constantly look around the faculty at places like the University of Virginia or Carnegie Mellon, and I go, damn, these are smart people, right? And I snuck in. But what I like to think I'm good at is the meta skills, because if you're going to have to run with people who are faster than you, you have to find the right ways to optimize what skills you do have. So let's talk first about goals, priorities, and planning. Anytime anything crosses your life, you've got to ask, this thing I'm thinking about doing, why am I doing it? Almost no one that I know starts with the core principle of, there's this thing on my to-do list, why is it there? Because if you start asking, well, why is, again, my kids are great at this. That's all I ever hear at home is, why? 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 Right? And sooner or later, they're going to stop saying why, and they're just going to say, okay, I'll do it. Right? So ask, why am I doing this? What is the goal? Why will I succeed at doing it? And here's my favorite. What will happen if I don't do it? If I just say, yeah, I'm just not, the best thing in the world is when I have something on my to-do list, and I just go, no. No one has ever come and taken me to jail. I talked my way out of a speeding ticket last week. It was really cool. It's like the closest I'm ever going to be to attractive and blonde. And I told the guy, why we had just moved and so on and so forth, and he looked at me and he said, well, for a guy who's only got a couple of months to live, you sure look good. And I just pulled up my shirt to show the scar, and I said, yeah, I look good on the outside, but the tumors are on the inside. He just ran back to his cruiser. And so that's one positive law enforcement experience for me. So the police have never come because I crossed something off my to-do list. And that's a very powerful thing because you just get all that time back. The other thing to keep in mind when you're doing goal setting is a lot of people focus on doing things right. I think it's very dangerous to focus on doing things right. I think it's much more important to do the right things. If you do the right things adequately, that's much more important than doing the wrong things beautifully. All right? Doesn't matter how well you polish the underside of the banister. Okay? And keep that in mind. Lou Holtz had a great list. Lou Holtz's 100 things to do in his life. And he would sort of once a week look at it and say, if I'm not working on those 100 things, why was I working on the others? And I just think that's an incredible way to frame things. There's something called the 80-20 rule. Sometimes you'll hear about the 90-10 rule. But the key thing to understand is that a very small number of things in your life or on your to-do list are going to contribute the vast majority of the value. So if you're a salesperson, 80% of the revenue is going to come from 20% of your clients. And you better figure out who those 20% are and spend all of your time sucking up to them, because that's where the revenue comes. So you've got to really be willing to say, this stuff is what's going to be the value and this other stuff isn't. And you've got to have the courage of your convictions to say, and therefore, I'm going to shove the other stuff off of the boat. The other thing you can remember is that experience comes with time, and it's really, really valuable, and there are no shortcuts to getting it. So good judgment comes from experience, and experience comes from bad judgment. So if things aren't going well, that probably means you're learning a lot and it'll go better later. This is, by the way, why we pay so much in American society for people who are typically older but have done lots of things in their past because we're paying for their experience because we know that experience is one of the things you can't fake. And do not lose sight of the power of inspiration. So Randy's in an hour-long talk, and we've already hit our first Disney reference. Walt Disney's quote. Walt Disney has many great quotes, but one I loved is, "If you can dream it, you can do it." And a lot of my cynical friends say, "Yada yada yada," to which I say, "Shut up." All right, inspiration is important, and I'll tell you this much: I don't know if Walt was right, but I'll tell you this much: if you refuse to allow yourself to dream it, I know you won't do it. So the power of dreams are that they give us a way to take the first step towards an accomplishment. And Walt was also not just a dreamer. Walt worked really hard. Disneyland, this amazes me because I know a little bit about how hard it is to put theme park attractions together. And they did the whole original Disneyland park in 366 days. That's from the first shovelful of dirt to the first paid admission. All right? Think about how long it takes to do something, say, at a state university. By comparison. So it's just fascinating. When someone once asked Walt Disney, how did you get it done in 366 days? He just deadpanned, we used every one of them. All right? So again, there are no shortcuts. There's a lot of hard work in anything you want to accomplish. All right. Planning is very important. One of the time management cliches is planning to fail. Failing to plan is planning to fail. And planning has to be done at multiple levels. I have a plan every morning when I wake up and I say, what do I need to get done today? What do I need to get done this week? What do I need to get done each semester? That's sort of the time quanta because I'm an academic. And that doesn't mean you're locked into it. People say, well, yeah, but things are so fluid. I'm going to have to change the plan. And I'm like, yes, you are going to have to change the plan. But you can't change it unless you have it. And the excuse of I'm not going to make a plan because things might change is just this paralysis of I don't have any marching orders. So have a plan, acknowledge that you're going to change it, but have it so you have the basis to start with. To-do lists. How many people here right now, if I said, can you produce it, could show me their to-do list? Okay, not bad. Not bad. The key thing with to-do lists is you have to break things down into small steps. I literally, once on my to-do list when I was a junior faculty member here at the University of Virginia, I put, get tenure. That was naive. And I looked at that for a while and I said, oh, that's really hard. I don't think I can do that. My children, Dylan and Logan and Chloe, particularly Dylan, is at the age where he can clean his own damn room, thank you very much. But he doesn't like to. And Chris is smiling because I used to do this story on him, but now I've got my own kids to pick on. But Dylan will come to me and say, I can't pick up my room. It's too much stuff. He's not even a teenager, and he's already got that move, And I say, well, can you make your bed? Yeah, I can do that. Okay, can you put all the clothes in the hamper? Yeah, I can do that. And you do 3 or 4 things, and then it's like, well, Dylan, you just cleaned your room. I cleaned my room, right? And he feels good. He is empowered. And everybody's happy. And of course, I've had to spend twice as much time managing him as I could have done it by myself, but that's okay. That's what being a boss is about, is growing your people, no matter how small or large they might be at the time. The last thing about to-do lists or getting yourself going is if you've got a bunch of things to do the ugliest thing first. There's an old saying, if you have to eat a frog, don't spend a lot of time looking at it first. And if you have to eat 3 of them, don't start with the small one. All right, this is the most important slide in the entire talk. So if you want to leave after this slide, I will not be offended because it's all downhill from here. And this is blatantly stolen. This is Stephen Covey's great contribution to the world. He talks about it in the 7 Habits book. Imagine your to-do list. Most people sort their to-do list either, the order that I got it, throw it on the